All right, good morning, everyone. We'll get started. We have just about 8 people in the room. So we'll get started right away. In this section of the course, we're going to be talking about types of reports, research report writing. And basically, we're just going to focus on the structured report writing. The unstructured report writing is not useful since it's basically there's really no way to index such reports or even to publish such reports, right, where they will be useful. So that's why always focus on the structured report writing. So this is what we're going to look at. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the structure for your project report, which is long form reporting, right? So there are two types of reports. There are the long form reports and then the short form reports. The long form reports are what you publish that describes all of the processes, all of the stages in detail about your research work. And then the short form writing is a manuscript that is published usually in journals and later pulled together into secondary resources. So that structure is introduction, literature, literature review, materials and method, result, discussion and conclusion, right? And we're going to talk about the abstract and what it is. It's just a short form of a short representation of the entire research work that you've put together. And then lastly, we're going to talk about what to look out for in submitting a manuscript. Like I said, the manuscript is a short form of your research writing, but it follows the IMRAD-C format. Introduction, method. So in this case, the introduction will usually be a measure or a summary of both the background to the study and the most important literature that exposes the gap in the literature, right, that your research is filling. Then the materials and method, the results you got, and then how you discussed your results and the conclusion of your study. Okay, it's always important that that conclusion, discussion and conclusion match up with the objectives of the study. So it's important that you pay attention to that as we go on. Of course, we'll make a light mention about plagiarism as well, so that you know what to do. Now, let's paint an introduction. By way of introduction, right? This is where we talk about the background to the study, or this is the part where you paint a big picture, right? And explain all of the most important concepts in your study. If some of you have your project topics already, you can post them in the comment section so that I can use some of that as an example, right? And help you paint a picture that you will understand, okay? So if you have, what's it called? If you have a project title already, you can post it in the chat area, and then in the course of this, I'll use that as an example to clarify to you guys. So I haven't seen any example yet. So let's just use the example of someone wants to do a cross-sectional study, right? A cross-sectional survey of okay, so we have one already, and then medicine information use among hypertensive patients. Okay, so those are really all. So first, by way of introduction, like I said, we explain all the most important concepts, right, around our topic. That's the first thing we'll do. So in the first example, right, you can see right there that one is the first title that I typed out is cross-sectional survey of medicine information use among hypertensive patients. Here, the concepts that are important for you to define and flesh out in introduction is hypertension. What is hypertension? What is its incidence in Nigeria, right? And how is it treated in Nigeria? Okay. What is medicine information? What does it contain? What are the types of medicine information that are provided to patients? Of course, there's written and there's oral or verbal, right? Now, what from both the written and the oral, what kind of information is presented? There's information about disease states, there's information about medicine. Under information about medicine, since we're focused on medicine information, there's information about the type of medicines, how the medicines work, how the patient should use medicine, when them, what medicines contain. There's also information about the type of side effects that the patient can expect, the type of benefits that they can expect, what to do if there are also challenges along the line, right? So those are important concepts that need to be discussed. On the side of the second topic, Azadirachta indica and eucalyptus oil in shampoo formulation for seborrheic dermatitis. First, seborrheic dermatitis, right? What is this condition? What is the incidence in Nigeria? What causes it? How is it currently treated in Nigeria? What are the gaps in the treatment of seborrheic dermatitis in Nigeria, right? And then, okay, you now go on to indications where Azadirachta indica, what is Azadirachta indica? Is it like a commonly growing plant in Nigeria? Is it commonly available? Has there been any indicated benefits in the management of seborrheic dermatitis, right? What is eucalyptus oil? Where is it obtained from in Nigeria? Is it a locally occurring? Is it extracted from a locally occurring plant, or is it gathered in the wild, or is it cultivated? And then how or what are the benefits in the treatment of seborrheic dermatitis? Okay, so all of that you have to, zone in on in the introduction, right? You have to zone in on that in the introduction. You also, as you're making those statements, right, fairly represent all that is known in the field. So what are the things that we know for a fact in this area of study in the terms of medicine information provided to patients in the area of seborrheic dermatitis? What is being currently used to treat patients, right? Along that line, when you've explained those concepts, somebody who is naive, who does not understand anything about your field, would have, come to a fair understanding of what you're talking about. It's also important that you define all terms before you begin to, before you begin to what's it called? Represent them with abbreviations. Okay, very important that as you're using new terms, you ensure that you do not abbreviate them until you have mentioned it in full and explained what it means. Okay, and then of course you provide a justification for the study. One of the ways you do this is by identifying the gap in knowledge. So you may say, in the first one, you may say that there's not enough studies currently, or if there is no local study currently, you can say there's no local study currently currently that provides valuable information about the kind and the quality of medicine information that hypertensive patients are currently getting to support their medicine use in the hospitals, right? For as a director case, that's case 2, you'll be a bit more you zone in a bit more, right? In the treatment of seborrheic dermatitis, several patients may not be able to afford the finished products that are in the market, but since these products are available naturally in the environment where these patients live, they can easily make up the formulation and use it to treat their scalp. Okay, so it's important that along the line, right, you are bringing out a very important reason. You may not be the one that chose the topic, as is the case usually for undergraduate studies. You may not be the one that will choose the topic, but it's important that you think thoroughly, right, about the topic. Think about it clearly so that you can identify what is missing. And when you think about it as, okay, there's not enough, please go to your literature sources again and search. Is there enough data around this? If there is enough, for example, if there is enough that there is even a literature review, a systematic review, sorry, right, of the literature on that topic, it means that there is sufficient, that's a recent one in the last 2-3 years, it means there's sufficient data. But if, for example, the challenge is that there is no recent data presented, if the challenge is that it's been well published in the international journal, international scholar space, excuse me, but it has not been published, there is no study from Nigeria, mention that as well. But please ensure that you identify the reason behind your study and why it has come up at this time. Okay, so you provide justification for the study and state it as such, right? The reason this study will provide more data to, I'm trying to coin for you an example of, a justification, right? Or sometimes it's called significance of the study. So the study aims to identify, or the study aims to characterize the quality and the extent of written medicine information provided to hypertensive patients attending clinic in so hospital. Excuse me. On the other study, the study, that's number 2 case that we're looking at, the study aims to this is not clear on what kind, if it's if you're just going to do if what you want to do is sample in the market and test the quality of what it contains, or you want to go to the market and do a survey to find out if there are shampoos that contain eucalyptus oil and Azadirachta indica extract. This doesn't say clearly. Okay, but let's assume that what you want to do is find out what is available in the market that contains this product, right? So this study aims to do a market survey to identify useful shampoos in the with formulations containing this and this available for seborrheic dermatitis treatment in Lagos market, right? So those your justification for the study can be one or two statements, but it should be something that we arrive at logically. That's what I have been trying to address. It should be something that we arrive at logically. So it should be something that you can defend. Okay. Next is we also have to talk about the aims and the aim and the objectives. So usually for undergraduate research, we're looking at one aim and then maybe 2 or 3 maximum objectives, right? As you get better with your research, it doesn't really get better than that. It's usually still one aim and then maximum of 6 objectives on the side of the objectives, right? So the aim is the overarching thing. For example, in the example number 1, the aim could be the research could aim to survey medicine, to survey hypertensive patients attending, to survey hypertensive patients attending clinic at so-so hospital and identify their medicine information use practices. And then the objectives you will now break down into 3. 1, to identify the quality and quantity or the extent of information that is provided to hypertensive patients attending clinic at BAM. 2, that's objective number 2, to identify the hypertensive patient's knowledge of hypertensive medicines that they use. 3, to identify the adherence practices of patients attending clinic, of hypertensive patients attending clinic at so-so hospital, right? So all of that is a breakdown of what should be in your tool. I hope you're following. All of our objectives must be represented in the tool with which we will do our research. We'll still get there, but I just wanted to point this out. Our objectives must match our tools, must match our discussion. It must flow in a straight line. Okay? And so that must be presented in our introduction. And then at some level, not at your level, but for example, we require that from master's level, that you be able to propose a hypothesis to support your study. Okay, very important. It's not as if you're not testing hypotheses, right, at your level, but we think that at your level, it's important that you get the skill first in both carrying out a research under supervision and then secondly, in applying a tool or several tools to obtain research results, open you up to that field, and then also get you to understand what research skills really are like. Okay, so the introduction clearly breaks down excuse me. The introduction clearly breaks down the most important concepts that our study surrounds, okay? On to literature review. That's the second part. Now, the literature review summarizes the most important facts about our study to date, okay? It's usually a narrative review that presents a summary of all relevant published articles, right? And what it does is, after the broad conceptual explanation that we do in introduction, we now come to the part where similar studies have been carried out. We summarize that and ultimately show that there's that gap that we've been talking about, right? And also show some of the methods that we are proposing to use. We'll show how it has been applied in the past to obtain a valid result, right? We'll also show if you're doing a qualitative study, right? There's quantitative, there's qualitative. We'll get there, okay? That's going to be in the next class that we'll talk about after this one. If you're doing a qualitative study, would expect that you'd also present to us similar studies that have shown that you can get a valid response from doing your study in this way, okay? So we expect that you present under literature review similar studies that have been done in the past, both in a broad context and in a narrower context. So what do I mean by broad and narrow context? So first, when you start in your literature review, you start from the global perspective. Sometimes the global perspective may be too broad, and we'll say, okay, start from the national perspective. But usually the reason why you start from the global perspective is, for example, in the first case study we're looking at, cross-sectional study of medicine information use among hypertensive patients, right? In that study, you will find that it's not only in Nigeria that we have hypertensive patients. We have hypertensive patients all over the world, right? And so here in Nigeria, how do, sorry, in a global context, how has medicine information been surveyed? What kind of surveys of medicine information have been carried out? With what kind of aims, with what kind of goals, and how have their results, been summarized? So you do a large representation of those kind of studies, right, in your literature review part. And then, of course, literature review must be structured. So you tell us this has been done in the global north. Maybe you present first to us studies done in the UK, in the US, in Canada, in first world nations, right, where they have all the resources available to them. Then you talk about studies done in low and middle income countries and how that may be different from what is done in the global studies that you've seen. And then, of course, you also go out of your way to look for systematic reviews on both the method and the concepts that you're researching around, right? And summarize those as well in order to present to us a flowing narrative of research that has been done in that field globally. Then you look at, you remember the first example I talked about, the global north, UK, US, Canada, Russia, China, right? England. Those are studies that, they always are presented as the most qualitative. They may not always be, but they're usually presented as the most qualitative because of access to more resources and more data than we have access to here in the global south. Now, once you present that, then you now begin to narrow down, okay, these are studies that have been done in low and middle income countries, and these are their own characteristics. Then you narrow down further again. These are researches that have been done in Africa, and these are, similar areas to Nigeria, and this is what has been done. Then you now narrow down further to the entire country. These are the studies that have been done in Nigeria, and this is what they have also gotten as result. This is how they are different from the ones that have been done in other countries in Africa. This is how they are similar. This is how they are dissimilar to the global context. And this is how they are similar to the global context. Are they valid as those other studies in it? All of that narration comes under literature review. And this is why, and this is why we say that your literature review is the most important narration that you will do during your research. Okay. So you review, you read the articles, you evaluate them, take notes, and then you formulate your own ideas. I know that Professor Joda has covered some part of literature, systematic literature review, right? But those same principles are what is applicable under literature review. Give me a minute, please. I'll be right back with you. Sorry about the delay. Let's quickly sort something out. So, like I said just before the break, the literature review is similar to the systematic literature review in that it summarizes the most important facts to date. So once that is done, ensure that you read through to be certain that it's coherent and orderly. Okay, it should be ordered. The high concepts should come first and then break down into the smaller concepts and then to the concepts that you use in your study. Okay, that's very important. I will share. I'll share a couple of studies with you so that you use that to understand what I mean in terms of the literature review part and how to ensure that's properly written. Now, after literature review, we come to materials and methods. That's for those that will be doing bench work, materials and methods are very important, right? For those that will be doing bench work and physical studies, right? You will need materials and methods section. For those that will be doing surveys, or I don't expect that there'll be any clinical intervention. I don't expect that there'll be any clinical intervention at your level. But then, even with clinical interventions, usually you will have a materials and methods section, because when you're doing a clinical intervention, the tools that you will use have to be listed out. Right. Now, why do we have a materials and methods section, right? They practically show your workings, right? The most important part of science is reproducibility. That if you do something, it must be under the same conditions true for somebody else, right? And that's very key. Reproducibility is one of the core tenets of science. And the way we achieve that is by describing in detail all materials and processes that you have employed. So take, for example, in the cross-sectional survey, like I said, we don't have an idea of what method the other example is going to utilize. But for the cross-sectional survey, what it means is what it means is the researcher will tell us what the sample, the location of their sample, right? What it will, what they will look for, right? In identifying that sample. Sorry, I'm having something going on with this coughing today. Apologies about that. So, like I said, the researcher will tell us, okay, sorry, first, the researcher needs to tell us their study design. In terms of study design, we're going to get into that next week, right? During this lecture next week. But essentially what it means is the study going to be a qualitative? So there are two big divides, qualitative and quantitative, right? In qualitative, you're analyzing experiences, you're exploring themes. So you're not using numbers per se. You can count experiences and, describe them, but you cannot use statistical processes to analyze qualitative studies. On the other hand, in quantitative studies, right, you use a lot of mathematical processes to decide the result, right? So you need to tell us what your study design is. How is it designed? Is it going to be is it going to be a cross-sectional study? Is it going to be bench work? Is it going to be a clinical intervention? Is it going to be? So you need to describe, right? The study design is the method that you will use, right, in employing your tools to arrive at a scientific conclusion. So you must be able to tell us what your study design is at that point. The next is, in fact, to a great extent, I feel like the course structure is not right. Next week's lecture should have even come up before this one of reporting the materials and methods, right? But we'll rectify that subsequently. Okay, so next you need to tell us, for example, if you're doing a survey. Okay, yes, so we're still using this example of the survey, right? So this person who is doing a survey will also tell us, when he's telling us his research design, he'll tell us the type of tool he's using and what kind of tool it is. So if it's the one that developed it, he will have to let us know. If it's a pre-tested tool, he'll have to let us know. If it's already validated, he'll need to let us know, right? All of that is important. Now we'll go on to, so for the cross-sectional survey, there'll also be sample size determination. So he has to determine the sample size, tell us what formula, show the working and how the sample size was gotten. He has to describe the population from which he will get this sample. So for example, it has to describe the location, which is often Lagos. Tell us about the population of Lagos. Tell us about the location of the hospital where you want to go and do the survey. Tell us about how many patients are in that hospital and how many patients are attending the clinic that you want to go and survey. Then, okay, we've talked about sample size determination. You show us a formula for determining your sample size, and then going on to sampling and selection criteria. So you need to tell us what type of sampling you will be doing, right? Are you going to be doing random sampling or non-random sampling? If you're going to be doing non-random sampling, give us a rationale for that. Why do you want to use non-random? If you want to do random sampling, tell us why you want to do random sampling and how you will achieve randomization. Okay. Now you also tell us the inclusion criteria. That's the characteristics of the patient that you want to include in the study. You have to describe that to us. Now, some of those patients with that character will still not fit your study. So you have to tell us how you will exclude them in a fair way. Okay. For example, you are recruiting all hypertensive patients at this clinic, right, who are of 18 years and above, so that you don't need to get parental consent. So you're going to be surveying all adults, hypertensive patients presenting at this clinic. Which ones are you not going to survey? So you will exclude maybe patients with mental health challenges. You will exclude patients that are not ambulatory. You will exclude patients that are that don't speak English, since your primary language of research is English, right? So all of that, all what it does is helps you present the logic behind how you will choose the people to answer your questions, okay? And then, of course, you describe your data collection and how that will go, right? Under it, of course, you must explicitly tell us what your tool contains, right? And then, of course, tell us your ethical approval process and how you will obtain informed consent for the research. You must also tell us your analytical method, how you will analyze your your results from the study. Okay. Now remember that in reports, once you're done with your introduction and literature review, the other remaining part of your study must be in reported speech. Okay, the remaining part of the study must be in reported speech. Okay, and for example, in still with the same example, the example number 1 that we're looking at, you say study design is a cross-sectional design using pre-tested, pre-validated structured questionnaire. Okay, let me give you another example of reported speech. Let's look at sampling and selection criteria. Systematic random sampling was done with N+1. So each patient chosen using the formula, using the repeating form N+1, each hypertensive patient, recruited using the repeating form N+1 was sampled as they was approached to participate in the study as they presented at the cardiology clinic for the appointment. Okay, reported speech. Let me give you one again, maybe on ethical approval. Ethical approval was requested and obtained from the Health Research and Ethics Committee of the Lagos University Teaching Hospital, address, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so all of these are to ensure that you explain thoroughly all the steps that you took. The second study, let's assume that what you want to do is you want to do the formulation, right, in the laboratory. So under your method section, one, you first talk about, of course, that's an experimental method, right? An experimental method is a scientific method. It means that you describe all your materials and your equipment and your processes in such a way that somebody can adequately repeat the same thing, right? So once you have identified your established method, first, you list your materials, list in exactly, for example, if you're talking about eucalyptus oil that you obtained from the market, you must describe where you obtained it from, right? And in what condition it was presented to you. If you're working with an API from a pharmaceutical company, you must, after writing the name of the API, right, you must open up a bracket and tell us the name of the manufacturer, their address, the batch number of the API. All identifying information about that API must be presented. Now, when you get to equipment section 2, every equipment that you will use, including the weighing balance, you must present all their names and their identifying information and where you used it, okay? So that it is replicable. If you're using glasswares, please mention the type of glasswares as well, right? If you're staying with magnetic stirrer, please mention the names, the model, everything about those things so that they are replicable. So you do your materials, your equipment, and then your method. So your method most of the time is adapted from an earlier study or adapted from the British Pharmacopoeia. Please identify, reference that method, right? If you did any adaptation, tell us the reason why you did the adaptation, okay, to that method, and how it will yield a different result from the original method. If the reason why you did an adaptation was because one of the materials that was used or a catalyst that was used in the previous research was not available, tell us why or how that will also impact on your on the results of your research, right? So you ensure that you describe your materials and methods to the letter T, okay? And once you have done that, then you go to the results. And results are very straightforward. You are only presenting to us what you have seen, okay? What results you have obtained from the study. Please record all results, both negative and the positive. The idea behind research is not to produce positive results, is to produce results, whether they are positive or negative, they should go forward. Okay, so for cross-sectional survey, of course, you start by summarizing demographic data. You summarize the important preliminary data if you're working with animals or other. You summarize the preliminary data first. Once you've summarized the preliminary data, then you move on to what's it called? You move on to the most important results of your research. And it is important that I mention it here that the difference between your long form reporting that you do as project students and the short form reporting that we publish is that for the short form, for the long form, right, your results must be presented in detail. While for the short form, your results, your most important results are the ones that will be presented. Okay, your most significant results are the ones presented for the short form, while the one that you submit to your department or you hold as proof of work, right, is the long form result that contains everything. Okay, and it's important that you learn how to use tables as well. Tables and figures, right? You don't have to have graphs and charts. No, tables are even sometimes more complementary. And then a way to do is to identify or to highlight significant results is you can put it in, you can make it bold, okay? You can make your significant report to stand out by highlighting them, make them bold, make the text bold or italicize them, just so that, it puts the reader's attention on the significant results you're getting. And once you just ensure that it's well structured, all your results are presented. Usually we say 1 table per page, and that's important for neatness and good presentation. I think the format is that you are also supposed to, in fact, all journals I think have adopted this method. So it's important that you listen very well. When you're writing your results, okay, always explain what the result is first before the table. So you summarize the table with the most important findings highlighted in your one paragraph summary. Okay. For example, a total of maybe 50 hypertensive patients without any other comorbidity attending clinic at Soso Hospital were recruited for this study. patients age 25 to 30 were the most frequent, were most sampled in this with this condition. Simple. And then you present your table. So the most important data that you want us to know should be summarized in that short write-up, one paragraph before the table is presented. Let me give another example. Let's say most of the patients, 78%, were aware of patient information leaflets. However, only half of them knew what information can be provided on the written medicine information leaflet, and less than half had received any such information during their past visits to the hospital. Okay, so and then you present your table again. So it's important that there's a short summary before your tables or after. So for tables, it is before the table. For figures, charts, it is after the chart. Okay, those are presented appropriately. And of course, titles should be appropriate, footnotes should be provided when needed, and ensure that all your results presentation are as nimble as possible. Now, another part I find that we often have difficulties with, and it's not just with undergraduate students, even with postgraduate students, is in the area of discussion, where you explain your findings and implications, right, to the person reading. Okay. Now, what should be in your discussion section? Discussion section should be you explaining your findings and the implications of those findings logically. So present your interpretation of your findings, organizing them in a logical format. For example, if in this example that I gave us, that number one example, we broke it down to 3 objectives. We said the first one was to identify the quality and the extent of written medicine information provided to the patient. So after discussing my demography, right, the next thing I should be doing is summarizing all results that relate to identifying the quality and extent of written medicine information from my results and comparing them with international studies, local studies, regional studies, and the ones that have gone before. Okay, comparing and contrasting. Okay, so it should contain statements like I'm trying to come up with one. Okay, let's say we have tried to identify let's say we've tried to identify like I said, quality and extent of written medicine information provided to the patient. We could come up to say, at the hospital, at this social hospital in Lagos, what we found was 82% of the respondents, sorry, what we will do is, what we'll do in this narration is, okay, so in results, we have it that 82% of patients were, sorry, we mentioned 78%, yeah. So 78% of patients were aware, right? That was in the result, in the summary on that table that we talked about. So here we'll now say, compared in primary health care, Mushin, there were much more people aware of written medicine information compared to PHC Igondo in 2023, and then we'll put the reference there. But this was significantly less to what was found in the results in the survey done by Bebe Nimibo at UI, University of Ibadan Teaching Hospital in 2022. Okay, so you're comparing and contrasting, and then you also help us understand why this difference may be there. Bebe Nimibo's result may be higher than the one obtained at this primary healthcare center because the skill of healthcare providers in tertiary hospitals providing information to patients is definitely expected to be much more better, right? There are more skilled healthcare providers in tertiary hospitals than in primary healthcare centers. But we are concerned that in peer primary healthcare centers, for example, at Igondo, we find that there may be less awareness among the healthcare providers that they need to support patients with chronic conditions with information, and then you reference what you're talking about. Okay? Now, globally, has there been any difference found between tertiary and primary healthcare centers? These differences that we've identified in this study is similar to that seen in the review by Ifeanyi in 2022, where patients in tertiary hospitals got more medicine information than those in primary healthcare centers. But the difference across peer health centers was shown to be due to the maybe lack of awareness on the part of the healthcare providers. So in that way, you take all of your results and you compare and contrast, right? You don't rank Xerox as in go and copy all the things in your results and come and paste it here and say the same things over again in English. No, that's not what we expect. What we expect here in the methods, in the discussion section is, what is the implication? So now you've told us that there's a difference between tertiary and primary. What is the difference? What is now the effect? Now say this may also be related to poorer outcomes of treatment, in primary health care compared to hypertensive patients treated in in tertiary healthcare centers. Excuse me. Okay, so you're telling us the implications of these differences. You're telling us the implications of your finding. Okay. And then, of course, you go on to other results and flesh them out in that way. Now, once you get all of that done, ensure that you take note of this. If your study was statistical, and there's a reason why I'm saying this. If your study was experimental and statistical, you will be able to talk about the general population. You'll be able to extrapolate your results to general population. But if your study does not meet statistical rigor, then you cannot generalize. So, for example, in order to have a statistically significant sample, right? You are supposed to recruit, just an example, 368 people for your study, and all you were able to recruit was 120. Your study cannot be generalized, but your study is still valid. You can still state your findings, okay? Because that result does not have sufficient power to explain the variations that may happen in the general population, but it is still valid for the number of people that you have recruited. So your study may initially aim to be statistical, but at the end may not have sufficient power to explain the variations that you'll find in the population, but still present it. It's still valid, right? Also important that you must not make causation claims on non-experimental studies. Okay, just say it is correlated. So when you begin to do all your statistical back flipping and front flipping, and you begin to abrogate powers to tests, please go back to the foundation of your study. If your study is experimental but not appropriately powered, you cannot talk about causation. If your study is experimental, which I do not think, in terms of explaining causation, I do not think anybody will give an undergraduate student a study that would maybe a cohort study, or you don't have that time. I mean, your study should just be within 3-4 months at the most, and then you submit your report. So it's important that you don't make claims that this, from my study, this has now shown that this is the reason why. It is not. You just say, from this result, there appears to be a correlation between this thing happening and this result happening as well. But there may be other confounders that we have not identified. Okay? Point out your limitations, the things you didn't do. Your limitations are usually a lot. We'll look at it next week, right? But just to explain that there will always be limitations to your study. So please, it's part of why you do research design, so that you can limit those limitations and improve your accuracy as well. So that's important. Conclusions: short, provide opportunities to summarize goals and the objectives that you have met, provide questions that you have not yet answered for future research, provide future directions of research, and then also provide sometimes we write solutions for government and other people inside our discussion. It shouldn't be there. It should be in your conclusion. So propose future directions for solving this problem, okay, that you've looked at. And then once again, highlight your most significant findings. Once you've done that and you finish that reporting, then you can quickly draw your short abstract. Even though your abstract is the first thing that is seen when they open your work, but your abstract is usually the last thing that is done. Okay, so you quickly write your abstract, short summary. Usually the abstract is structured, right? So you provide short statements about background and gaps and justification and the aims of your study, aim and objectives of your study, under that. Then provide clear summary of materials and method, provide most significant results, then summarize the summarize the findings of the study. So very, very short, usually between 250 to 400 words at the maximum for the abstract. Now, for publications that you will, the short one that I talked about, IMRAD, right, that just talks about the background or the introduction, the method, the results, and your discussion, right? Ensure that you're not presenting someone's work as yours without referencing the original author. Don't do direct copying. Don't do self-plagiarism. You're not at risk of that right now, but as you go on in your field, ensure that you're not essentially copying verbatim what you wrote in the last publication, right? And then something that I didn't add to this, I should mention to you. don't carry work work that was written by ChatGPT and present it as your literature review or your introduction or your discussion. ChatGPT will mess you up. Plagiarism checkers can identify, both plagiarism. They've been expanded to especially Authenticate, which is what the University of Lagos is using now, can identify both plagiarism and AI text writing. Okay, so AI can help you identify the subtopics, the frame for your writing, but don't use ChatGPT to write your essays. Once you are caught, that's academic offense. So you can use Grammarly, the free version, to check your text writing, to review your essays, to ensure that it is well written. Okay, and then of course, if you're submitting for publication, which I think you should, ensure that there's substantial contribution by anybody that is labeled an author. Okay, these are very important. With that, I come to the end of today's lecture. And any questions for me?
Sorry, sir, please, will the recording of this class be made available?
No, the slides will. Any questions? Okay. In the absence of any other
Sorry,
questions.
I have a question, sir.
Yes, please go ahead.
Is it possible that there's a scenario where there is no literature gap?
Where there is no literature gap.
Yes. What if everything has been talked about concerning that particular topic in that particular population?
And then you have no business researching that topic.
Sir, please, we need this for our project.
What's that? What do you need for your project?
The detailed explanation of the class.
And that's why you're in class now.
Yes, I've been able to join it a number. Yes.
Your jotting and the slides will help.
Sir, please.
All right. Any other question?
Thank you, sir.
Sorry,
sir.
Off your mic, Jerry.
we are talking about methodology. I said all the parameters have to be clearly and concisely stated. If you're using the active ingredient, you must put the batch number and the equipment. Is there a situation where you may not have access to those pertinent details of the things you used?
No, there's no situation in which you will not have that. There's no situation. None. It is impossible. There's no situation where that can occur. You must have access to all the details of the equipment, everything. If not, it means you didn't do the study yourself. That's what it means.
Yes, sir.
Please, don't mention that too. Because the first thing anybody thinks about is this person didn't do this research themselves. Okay. All right. Thanks to everyone that was present for this lecture. All the best in your in-course. Bye.